We know that Santa Ana-driven fires are a part of life here in the county and in the backcountry, but to have something that big so close was just amazing.
Not an October 21st goes by where I don't remember. I remember where I was, I remember what the sky looked like, and I remember these people, these poor people, and imagine what they went through.
Living with Wildfires, San Diego's Firestorm 10 years later. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
Good evening, I'm Amitha Sharma inside our KPBS News studios.
And I'm Ebony Monet, live in Rancho Bernardo at Bernardo Winery. This was one of the communities hardest hit by the 2007 wildfires. And 10 years ago, this was one of several properties threatened as the Witch Creek fire rolled in. Tonight, we're taking a look back at the mass evacuation efforts, those who fought the fires, plus those who covered them, and what we've learned. That's all coming up in just a bit. Amitha?
Thank you. Thank you, Ebony.
We're back out here live in Rancho Bernardo at Bernardo Winery, and now I'm joined by Ross Rizzo. He is the president and winemaker here. And 10 years ago, he and a few others did not evacuate, actually stayed here to protect this historic winery. Ross, thanks for being here. Could you tell us about the experience?
Yeah, Ebony. It was a crazy few days, actually. We were kind of watching the fire on TV. You know, all the reporting was really great, and my dad, who was still alive with us then, you know, he had lived through a lot of wildfires here. I mean, he'd lived on this property for all 68 years of his life, you know. So he knew that if there was a fire kind of up in San Isabel and then coming through San Pasqual Valley, it was going to end up here, and especially with the Santa Anas going. So he was the one that kind of got us to prepare a little bit. We pulled hoses out, and it was an interesting week for sure, you know.
So why'd you stay?
Well, I mean, you got to cruise around earlier. You can see the place. It's a 128-year-old winery. It's the 6th oldest winery in the state of California. So, I mean, it's got a lot of history and a lot of soul here. And, you know, we were going to, my mom and everybody was packed up in the car. We were going to leave. And then my dad's like, well, I'm just not going. I mean, obviously, I'm staying here. My whole life is here. So, of course, you know, obviously, well, I'm hanging out too. So, you know, he right off the bat said there's a lot of like really safe places to stay if the fire actually did come through and did start burning down the buildings. We have a lot of large parking lots and things like that. And he had lived through a few of those kinds of things, so he knew, you know. So we were going to be safe and do our best to protect the place, you know.
So we've heard about the powerful Santa Ana winds and the embers being blown for miles. What did you see?
I mean, I saw exactly that, and it was really incredible. I mean, like soup can size or like soda can size embers flying through the air, and you can see them coming, and then they would hit. Like, this was particularly the moment I remember, like, distinctly was on my driveway. The embers would hit the driveway, would scoot across the driveway, go up the wall of the house and up into the eaves. And later on, we heard that was like a really dangerous thing and caught a lot of houses on fire. So we were doing our best to put those out, but really incredible. And this was like at 4:30 in the morning too, so it was dark, and so you could see these embers coming.
Thank you so much. And while Ross and his father and a few others did not evacuate, most of his neighbors did. In fact, 10 years ago, it was the largest evacuation in San Diego history at the time, and still to this date, 50,000 people got evacuation orders, mandatory evacuation orders. And KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen takes a look back at the largest mass evacuation in San Diego County history. As you might imagine, this was an extremely difficult time for firefighters who were working to contain these fires during tough weather conditions. Javier Maynor was the assistant fire chief for San Diego at the time, and KPBS reporter Eric Anderson sat down with him recently to remember it all.
The Witch Creek fire began about 12:30 in the East County, and based upon its progression, we thought it might hit the city of San Diego about 4 or 5 in the morning. And that's when really the battle was going to begin.
One thing that marked the Cedar Fire in 2003 and the Witch and the Harris and all the other fires that burned in 2007 was this incredible wind that really pushed the flames quickly.
What we saw in 2007 was sustained winds of 45 miles and gusts in excess of 60 miles per hour. So not only did that move the Witch Creek Fire very quickly, and we thought it might hit us about 4 o'clock in the morning in the San Pasqual Valley, but at about 2 o'clock in the morning, a completely different fire called the Guajito Fire began in the San Pasqual Valley, and that created its own set of difficulties for everyone.
It wasn't very long after those two fires came together that they burned into Rancho Bernardo. What happened there?
Yeah, Guajito was actually the very first to reach Rancho Bernardo. We had positions in place. We deployed them as early as 10 p.m. We were making a lot of evacuations. We ultimately evacuated 200,000 people, which, kudos to our law enforcement partners who made that happen. San Diego PD did a fantastic job in evacuating people. But we were outgunned at that point. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I made a request for 50 fire engines through the state mutual aid system and was informed that there were none available. We would receive 0 as a result. I made a similar request at 4 o'clock in the morning. I got the same answer.
That Monday and Tuesday of that week when the head of the fire had basically stopped in Rancho Bernardo and you had a chance to go into that neighborhood, what were you feeling?
I did the first drive-through on my own. I'd been in the command post, I think, for 26 hours straight with the first run that I was there. Finally got a chance, I think, toward the end of the second day to get out. And I was just really taken aback by the number of homes we had lost. And we hadn't yet repatriated those communities yet. We hadn't repopulated them. But I got out another day after that, and when we had done that, and I ran across so many people that were grateful for what we had done. And I would talk with them and engage with them and get back in my car, and tears would begin to flow because I felt, to some degree, a sense of defeat that we hadn't done as much as I had hoped we could do for them. And they lost everything, yet they were so grateful for the efforts the firefighters put out. They had signs. The firefighters that were coming through were being given, drinks and baked goods and things. It was just absolutely incredible. But I had a heavy heart going through there.
A lot of devastation. Homes burned to the foundation, many on some cul-de-sacs.
Yes.
And then occasionally you would see a home standing. Random.
Some of it made sense to me. I could look at it and say, I know why that one. The folks there did a great job of providing defensible space. They'd hardened their home by the construction features of that particular home. In other ones, even with all the training that I've had, I looked at it and I said, there really is no rhyme or reason. I cannot pinpoint why this particular home survived while the others did not.
What did we learn from the Witch Creek fire? It's been 10 years now since we've had an equivalent firestorm situation, thank goodness. But what do we learn from that we'll be able to use when that situation happens again?
The weather patterns in Southern California are such that the fires begin to the north of us and they start to consume resources in the mutual aid system. And by the time the weather pattern reaches San Diego and we're asking for help, you get that, I don't have anything to send you, I'm sorry.
Retired San Diego Fire Chief Javier Maynor. Javier, thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric.
To clarify, in 2007, there were mandatory evacuation orders for 500,000 people. And as firefighters worked to gain control of those wildfires, photojournalists worked to capture it all. Some of that photography was actually published in a book by the San Diego Union-Tribune, Inferno, The Wildfires of 2007. And one of those photojournalists featured in this book is John Gibbons, who's been covering wildfires for nearly 4 decades.
Thick, cloud-like smoke traces Lyons Valley and mountaintops in one of John Gibbons' first images of the Harris Fire.
It's kind of like a moth to a light. You just kind of go to where the smoke is.
For nearly 40 years, Gibbons has been a San Diego Union-Tribune photojournalist. He says when the Harris Fire started, he knew it was time to get to work.
I mean, it's a huge adrenaline rush, and your adrenaline kicks in when things start happening.
The burn started in Potrero, about 5 miles north of the U.S.-Mexico border, an area in San Diego County Gibbons knows well.
We know that Santa Ana-driven fires are a part of life here in the county and in the backcountry, but to have something that big so close was just amazing.
Gibbons got to work capturing the firefight, evacuations, and humanity.
Photos they really need some kind of a human emotion or a human element in there, something that strikes a chord with people.
With press credentials, Gibbons had full access. As powerful Santa Ana winds fanned embers threatening homes and land, he set out to tell the story.
It just comes with training and instinct, and when composition and the subject matter comes together, you just do it. It's not a book-learned trade. You don't learn it by the book, you learn it in the school of the street.
It's a career he dreamt about as a Union-Tribune paperboy.
I remember sitting on the floor at my mom's house in La Mesa, folding that paper every day and seeing pictures from the Vietnam War and the Olympics. And I had a budding interest in photography then. And I thought, that'd be great to be able to go take these kinds of pictures.
Pictures encapsulating moments in time.
So there's our subject to flooding sign.
Such as the days the Harris Fire fiercely charred tens of thousands of acres of San Diego County's backcountry.
The contrast between the fire and the flooding, you think, could that ever happen again? And well, look at everything's green and nice again.
With extremely dry fuels, steep terrain, and what fire officials described as erratic flames, there were structures that couldn't be saved.
This guy's just looking over what was once his home, and it's gone, this family here. Some of the hardest things to see was the wildlife, like this bobcat, which is one of my favorite San Diego animals.
The speckled gray cat seems to gaze directly at Gibbons' lens.
He or she had burnt feet and was just kind of, very gingerly walking along the burned area right down here by the Barrett Dam. So it was really hard to see.
On the 5th day, Gibbons and a reporter spotted U.S. border agents standing with first responders on the side of a road.
Really quiet, kind of calm over the whole thing, but there was obviously something was really wrong.
They were staring down at the burn.
More people arrived, and as they looked around, they started seeing another body and another one and another one, and they found 4 victims.
In all, the Harris Fire claimed 8 lives, including Mexican nationals who couldn't escape a burning canyon.
They had crossed illegally into the country and just had really unfortunate timing that the fire had started and trapped them in this canyon, and they were all burned to death. It was a horrific situation, and seeing people that have died in a fire like that, it's something that it's etched in your head.
Still, there was more work to be done.
It's just giving the world to our people in an honest way. That's the goal.
A goal Gibbons ardently pursues day in and day out.
Photojournalists, we have a front row seat in the ride of life, and it's something that I wouldn't change. It's all I've ever done in my whole life. That's all I ever wanted to do.
Ebony Monet, KPBS News.
As the days went on, people started to learn about the victims that didn't survive the firestorm. Laura Castaneda is a professor and a documentary filmmaker. She was so moved after hearing about migrants who died after crossing into the U.S. that she and a small team set out to find their families and trace their stories back to Mexico.
And good afternoon, everyone. Some incredible breaking news to tell you about. A local emergency has been declared in response to 2 major fires during this afternoon.
Last October, this land was consumed by fire, driven by the hot, dry Santa Ana winds, known by the Native Americans as the Devil's Breath. I cannot believe that 10 years has passed, first of all, but I will tell you, over the last 10 years, not an October 21st goes by where I don't remember. I remember where I was, I remember what the sky looked like, and I remember these people, these poor people, and imagine what they went through.
Señorita, por favor, queremos una ayuda de emergencia, por favor, estamos aquí donde se está quemando, nosotros estamos.
7 of the victims who died were from Mexico. They died attempting to make their way into the United States through this dangerous and illegal route. I was in no position to be doing a documentary, but it haunted me. And so I started digging and I started calling people to see, you know, if there were more victims out there. And wow, I was just floored when I started finding out how many victims, unaccounted victims there were, in addition to the Americans, the 4 Americans that died in the fire. The Desert Angels bring him to the very spot where the 5 bodies were found weeks earlier.
Quisiera hablar de mi hija y decir que me respondieras, pero no se puede, mamacita. Muchos recuerdos que nos dejaste, mi hija.
Why was it important for you to tell their stories?
Once things started to kind of calm down, I realized that CAL FIRE and all the other agencies that were out there kept saying that 4 people died in the San Diego wildfires, and that was not true. There were 11 victims, whether they were American citizens or not, and they were all coming home to San Diego or home to Orange County or home to Los Angeles. And, you know, that's a whole nother subject, whether or not you believe they should have been here in the first place or whether, you know, whatever. Politics aside, they were human beings that left their homes for various reasons and were trying to get back home to their families and lost their lives. So for me, it was more from a humanitarian standpoint, like the statistics are wrong and we should get it right.